The Sega Scourge. All smoke, no mirrors.
Hey guys, I'm the Sega Scourge, and welcome back to the second episode of Sonic What If, for part 2 of What If Sonic Never Lost the Werehog form. At the end of part 1, I asked you guys for ideas on this Werehog AU going forward, as well as how Sonic would fare when faced with the prospect of being stuck with this nightly transformation. I read literally every comment on part 1, and I was blown away with the amount of responses I got, not just for this story, but also ideas for other what ifs. Your suggestions have given me all kinds of ideas on how to steer this story, and I really appreciate the warm response and feedback on this new series. Please keep that up. In the first part, we tackled a retold finale of Sonic Unleashed. Due to Dr. Eggman's meddling, Dark Gaia was taken control of and didn't reclaim the essence of itself that was inside Sonic. Rather than having it stripped away, Sonic kept the Werehog form in a climactic battle against the mind-controlled Dark Gaia that ultimately culminated in the appearance of Super Werehog, and with a little help from Chip, Sonic managed to put down the monster and set the world back to its natural order. Since parting ways with Chip, Sonic has worn Chip's bracelet almost 24/7, never taking it off for a moment, whereas in the actual games he just stopped wearing it after Unleashed. I mean, yeah, he probably put it in a memory box or something, but yeah, that's not happening in this story. That's part of his design now, the way it should have been. Despite Dark Gaia's defeat, the fragment of the creature's energy has not left Sonic and still triggers the same way as it always has. Sonic has become the Werehog every night since, and though this has derailed his usual way of life, Sonic has retained his usual optimism and happy-go-lucky attitude, finding different ways to enjoy the transformation. But not all is well with the Hedgehog hero. He's felt off, like he just isn't himself somehow. Worse still, he's been experiencing night terrors every time he's tried to get some sleep in the Werehog form. This escalated to a point that any sleep he's gotten since has been in the daytime in the form of quick power naps. Sonic has an underlying fear of losing control and becoming a monster like that of the Dark Gaia spawn. While wrestling with this fact, he actually forgot that he had a date planned with Amy, something he promised her back in Shamar during the events of Unleashed, but unfortunately, he had to cancel in order to take some time to himself. Poor Amy. The first real date between them, and Sonic had to blow it off. But to be fair, he desperately needs some space with everything that's been happening to him. One afternoon, Sonic visits a nearby riverside town and stops at a chili dog vendor for 2 doggies with the works. Just as he's about to tuck into the mouth-watering array of chopped onions and jalapeno chili, a rift suddenly opens beneath his feet and he falls through. Plummeting through the portal, Sonic is sent tumbling into the storybook world of Camelot, where Sonic and the Black Knight will now take place. I told you guys we were taking a detour before Sonic Colors. Let's jump into part 2 of this What If Werehog story. The story opens just as it did in the original. Melina, the former royal wizard, has been on the run from King Arthur and his demonic knights of the underworld. In her moment of need, she summoned a brave knight, swift as the wind, to help save her and her kingdom. Together, she and Sonic escape as the Knights of the Round Table watch from a nearby cliffside, and King Arthur orders them to slay the pair on sight. Meanwhile, after some introductions and explanations, Melina tells Sonic about the scabbard of Excalibur, which grants King Arthur his immortality, capable of healing any wound or ailment with its magic. After Sonic gets the cool little gauntlet thingy from the wizardess, the two of them set out for the Misty Lake to draw out the sacred sword Caliburn. King Arthur catches up to them and Sonic puts the power of Caliburn to the test, but ultimately is unable to defeat the evil king, who leaves on horseback mocking Sonic's lack of skill. During an argument between the two, Caliburn senses something in his bearer, something foul that is muddling Sonic's true aptitude and ability. Sonic sighs in disappointment. All he wanted was one adventure without any of this Werehog stuff being involved, but unfortunately the cat's out of the bag. Sonic tells the two what happens to him at night, detailing everything about the Werehog form. Melina is bewildered. She'd heard legends of dog heads in the outskirts, but she never believed the stories to be true. Least of all something like that coming from another world. I'm not a dog, I'm a hedgehog. Or Werehog. Sonic asks Melina if she could help him remove the Dark Gaia energy. Remember, Sonic still wants rid of the Werehog form. He'll take anything he can get. And magical world, sorceresses. There might be something here that can help him. Melina tells Sonic that her grandfather Merlin could have certainly removed the curse, But since he's no longer around, the scabbard of Excalibur is their best bet. If Sonic can defeat King Arthur and bring her the scabbard, she could use its healing magic to remove Sonic's curse. Of course, we know Melina's true intentions. This is just another way for her to achieve her goals faster. The story of Sonic and the Black Knight plays out. Caliburn's edge is restored by the blacksmith, Sonic travels to the deep woods, defeats Lancelot, and claims Arendite, another one of the sacred swords. He then meets the Lady of the Lake, who sets him 3 trials to complete in 3 days before she'll recognize him as a true knight and help him stop King Arthur and retrieve the scabbard. Undergoing these 3 trials, Sonic frees the imprisoned townsfolk from Camelot Castle's dungeon, shows compassion by showering them in riches, and defeats King Arthur's infernal minions of the night as he leads them to safety. But nighttime soon arrives, and Caliburn witnesses firsthand Sonic's transformation. During a moonlit battle with the Knights of the Underworld away from the townsfolk, Sonic becomes the Werehog and cuts down the medieval phantoms with his brutish strength. Shocked upon seeing this feline form of Sonic's, Caliburn's mind suddenly recalls someone who suffered from a similar condition. Seeing you this way has me recall Sir Marek, a knight who had been transformed into an animal by his jointress. Though the townsfolk recoiled in fear at the sight of him, he still fought to uphold peace and battle against villainy. He was honored with a seat at the Round Table, where he served King Arthur for many years, including as one of his personal guard. Sonic asks if a cure was ever found. Caliburn responds that some kind of magical intervention was used, but that's all he knows. What happened to Sir Marek after that is shrouded in mystery. My point is, though he held the appearance of an altered beast, Marek was brave and kind-hearted to a fault. You remind me a lot of him, Sonic. Caliburn reveals that he disagrees with Melina's plan to use the scabbard's power. He says that only the long-lost light of the sacred swords could truly remedy Sonic's curse. Ooh, foreshadowing. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to the two, a townsperson from a neighboring village had been watching from the bushes nearby and witnessed Sonic's monstrous change. With his keen sense of smell, Werehog Sonic sniffs them out and shouts, "Hey!" before they run off into the woods yelling, probably off to gossip about what they just saw. A day or two later, with the imprisoned townsfolk safe, Sonic heads back to the Misty Lake and encounters a crying child whose village had been abducted by a dragon, and Sonic decides to help rescue them. On his way to do so, he runs into the hard-headed Sir Gawain. Gawain has heard rumors about a monstrous blue fiend stalking the plains at night. He takes this as proof that Sonic is conspiring against the king using dark magic and mercilessly sets upon him. Sonic inevitably beats Gawain and takes the twin blades Galatine from him. The Lady of the Lake then reveals herself as the crying child all along, and she was testing Sonic. She then reveals that he can blunt the scabbard of Excalibur's power using the sacred swords wielded by the Knights of the Round Table. Ultimately, this leads Sonic to his confrontation with Sir Percival, Knight of the Grail. The dialogue kind of goes as it does in the game, with the same cheesy speech of, "I have no master except the wind that blows free, yada yada yada." The conversation then veers, as Percival says that she too has heard these whispers of a monster, but she's a lot more cordial than Gawain, and recognizes Sonic's skill, so she asks if there's any truth to these rumors. Being the person Sonic is, Sonic tells the truth about the Werehog, but explains that he's not a bad guy even though he might look bad. Percival moves in to attack, but of course, Sonic defeats her before saving her from a fiery doom and claiming Livatine for his own. The act of kindness earns him Caliburn's respect and the title Knight of the Wind. Melina then arrives, having seen things unfolding from afar, and informs the pair that King Arthur is on faraway Avalon. Sonic and Caliburn arrive, and with the power of the 3 sacred swords and one swift slash, Sonic strikes down the Black Knight. King Arthur disappears, and Sonic obtains the scabbard, returning with it to Camelot to meet Melina, just as she's been intercepted by the Knights of the Round Table. Just like in the game, Sonic explains the situation about the vanishing king, and then gives Melina the scabbard. Melina has finally got what she wanted. Finally, this is her moment, to use the scabbard's power of immortality and the dark magic of the underworld to make the kingdom immortal. But despite her dark queenly ambitions, a part of her is still benevolent. She sticks to her promise of curing Sonic of Dark Gaia's snare, and using the scabbard, she envelops Sonic in a magical haze, bestowing a part of its healing power upon him. That's when things go horribly, horribly wrong. The plan backfires. Rather than stripping Dark Gaia's energy away from Sonic, the healing power of the scabbard makes it much worse. Even though it's broad daylight, Sonic's body begins to crack and mutate, transforming into the Werehog, but a very different Werehog from the one we've grown accustomed to. Sonic's body becomes tinged with purple dark Gaia energy, his eyes fill with aquamarine flames. Chip's bracelet snaps off as his arms swell up to immeasurable size, and the token of friendship now lies in pieces on the floor. The knights can only look on at the turmoil unfolding. Then, without warning, the Werehog snatches the scabbard from Melina and knocks her away, siphoning off more of its immortal power. The knights jump in and try to help, but they're no match for the heinous beast being simply knocked aside. The Werehog leaps forward and goes in for a killing blow on the knights, but that's when Caliburn swoops in and blocks the attack. "Sonic, come to your senses! This isn't you!" Try as he might, Caliburn can't get through to him. Sonic has now succumbed to Dark Gaia's energy and completely lost his mind. Werehog then takes hold of Caliburn, and with his frightening power, he snaps the sword in two. Purple mist then pours from the Werehog's body and blankets the sky across Camelot Castle. The knights fall into a state of despair and negativity. Melina witnesses this and realizes the true danger of the scabbard she intended to use. Through her desperation of changing fate, she has created a monster that may doom the kingdom she'd hoped to save. Using her magic, Melina shields herself and the knights from the Dark Mist's influence, and then conjures chains to bind the Werehog, wrapping around him and forming a large padlock on his chest. She shouts to the knights, telling them to escape and find the Lady of the Lake before returning their sacred swords to them from Sonic, as well as the broken Caliburn. This particularly bedevils Lancelot, as he's been without mercy towards her, but now here she is, saving their lives. The Knights of the Round Table are forced to flee, and with the Lady of the Lake's help, they set off to use the sacred swords to form a barrier around the kingdom, halting the spread of the darkness. As per the location of each barrier stone, Gawain heads off to the Great Megalith, Percival to the Cauldron, and with no Sonic around, Lancelot heads into the Dragon's Lair. Meanwhile, the Lady of the Lake gets involved and disguises herself as a knight of the underworld, setting off for the Shrouded Forest with the broken Caliburn. The barrier is formed, but due to Caliburn being broken, it's even weaker than it was in the original game. The Lady of the Lake and the Knights can only look onward hopelessly as Melina tries her best to restrain the Werehog, who is now chewing through his chains. They call out to her, telling her to run, but she ignores their plea and instead reveals what her true intentions were all along: to apply the scabbard's power of immortality to the realm, making the Grand Kingdom everlasting and saving it from the ruin and warfare it would face in the future. As she bears her sins, Melina's power finally reaches its limit. Her shield drops and she falls to her knees as the chains shatter, releasing the savage Werehog. He shakes loose his shackles, but some of them stay wrapped around his body and arms, as well as the large lock on his chest. The maleficent Werehog snarls and approaches Melina, each step he takes cracking the ground beneath him. The knights quarrel on what to do. They couldn't take Sonic before, they can't hope to take him as he is now. Amidst the bickering, Lancelot recalls the code of chivalry to protect those in need. He realizes, though twisted, Melina did possess good intentions but was simply led astray, much like how he was led astray when he blindly followed King Arthur's orders. As the Werehog bounds towards Melina, Lancelot takes hold of Arundite and jumps through the reflecting pool to defend her, where he is then struck a fatal blow. Fighting back against the influence of the Dark Mist, he tells her to flee, and with the beast bearing down on him, Lancelot sees the truth of Sonic's form: a pure soul, corrupted by a devilry from another world. Casting away the ruthlessness he'd learned under King Arthur's orders, he calls out, "I am Lancelot, Knight of the Round Table no longer. From this moment on, I choose my own destiny." Lancelot has regained the selflessness and courage that made him the greatest of all knights. Through his determination and the power of the sacred swords, Caliburn is repaired, and Lancelot is then encased in a mystical golden armor, becoming Excalibur Lancelot. Now wielding the might of Excalibur, the greatest of all sacred swords, he flies into battle against the Werehog. This form of the Werehog is a lot more lumbering than the normal one. Having removed the Sonic side of himself, his speed is completely gone, but his raw power and strength has increased to its fullest potential. Not only that, but the Werehog is now capable of puking out huge waves of magenta-colored fire. An attack like that could easily take Lancelot out for good. Being Shadow's doppelganger and possessing many of the same abilities he does, he uses his chaos powers, vanishing and reappearing all around the Werehog, controlling the flow of battle as the Werehog tries to snatch him out of the air with his stretchy arms. Even though he has the advantage, the Werehog's ferociousness keeps Lancelot at bay, unable to deliver the final blow. The Werehog howls and tramples around, but just then, he is stopped in his tracks by a voice that only he can hear. The Werehog turns and looks over at Chip's bracelet on the floor. The bracelet's gem is now glowing green.
Sonic, you have to fight it. You have to remember who you are. Remember.
Werehog is frozen solid, and while gazing blankly at the gem, a single tear rolls down his cheek. With the beast's back turned, Caliburn's voice calls out to Lancelot. With 2 hands, Lancelot raises Excalibur into midair as it fills with yellow light, and he calls out his finishing move. Chaos? Deliverance! He slashes downwards, and a vertical wave of light propels through the air and collides with the Werehog's back right down the middle. Lancelot is using this attack to try and exorcise the demon, literally splitting the Werehog form from Sonic. Light bellows from the Werehog's body from both sides as he roars, and the scene fades to white. Sonic comes to as Melina and the Knights of the Round Table gather around him. The first thing Sonic does as he gets up is apologize to Caliburn for what he did to him. He explains that he could see what was happening, but he just couldn't control himself. Sonic then turns to apologize to Melina and the Knights too, but Melina simply says the fault lies with her for misleading him and humbly begs his forgiveness, to which Sonic just replies, don't worry about it. Sonic then turns to Lancelot, and with a sincerity that is very rare for the character, he simply says, thank you. Lancelot just smiles and nods in acknowledgement. Sonic then walks over to the broken bracelet and picks up the pieces. And thank you, Chip. Melina asks if Sonic's curse has been overcome, but sadly, nope. Sonic can still feel Dark Gaia's energy inside of him. The power of Excalibur weakened it and put it back to normal, but it wasn't enough to remove it completely. With the topic of Round Table disbandment now that King Arthur is gone, Caliburn reminds the knights that he is the one who chooses who is fit to be king. In the game, this would of course be Sonic, but with his Werehog form and the townspeople's view of him, Sonic just wouldn't be fit for this role. And so Caliburn decides to go back to resting in the stone in Misty Lake until a true worthy successor can be found. Melina retrieves the scabbard and vows to ensure that it will never be misused again, having learned a valuable lesson about the natural order of life. Sonic's pretty heartbroken about breaking the bracelet. I mean, surely there's no way it can be fixed now. Well, thankfully, they have a blacksmith. He fixes up Chip's bracelet good as new. As the story comes to its close, Sonic bids fare thee well to Melina and the Knights of the Round Table and departs from Camelot back to his own world. And that's where we'll end the story for now. So what did you guys think? What did you think about the Werehog's inclusion in the story of Black Knight? What did you think about Lancelot's shift in character and him being the one to use the power of Excalibur? And what about Sonic's transformation into an uncontrolled form of the Werehog? I'd like to see if you guys can come up with a name for this form, as I couldn't think of one while I was writing this story out. But could this event have negative repercussions on Sonic going forward? And let's not forget the nightmares he's been suffering from since he's kept the Werehog form. Please share your thoughts with me in the comments below and let me know what you guys want to see in part 3 to this story. Until then, I've been the Sega Scourge and I will see you guys in the next Sonic What If. Take care.